Hello, my name is Jim Robb. I'm the president of the National Training and Simulation Association. I'd like to welcome you all to our first webinar of a new series. For those new to NTSA, we're a nonprofit association dedicated to facilitating dialogue between government, industry, and academia on items of interest to the training systems community, ultimately in support of our warfighters and first responders. So it's a tight-knit community working to really provide the training to send folks overseas into harm's way, and also to take care of the first responders and their families. NTSA hosts 9 events a year. This will be number 10, actually. The last of which is the Inter-Service Industry Training Simulation Education Conference in December, ITSIC, and it's a huge event. We get all the training community together. So if you're new to this community on the webinar, we invite you to go to itsic.org and check it out and potentially come this year. It's a great event of about 17,000 as of last year. So we would like to welcome you into the community, which is very tight knit. Before we get into the agenda, I'd like to give some recognition to the team that's put this together. We have a new NTSA events team, and we put together a webinar committee. The committee is chaired by Daniel Surfete from Epstein Corporation, who's been a longtime supporter and keynote at ITSIC. Mr. Bob Kleinhamble from SAIC, Ms. Juliana Sly, who's the CEO of Government Business Results LLC, who's just a wonderful person and a great supporter. And of course, we've got Debbie Langelier and Renee Despot here at the NTSA staff, who've really worked hard to put the pieces together for this webinar series, and I thank them all. Also on the line today is Dr. Linda Brent, who's a consultant for NTSA and the CEO of ASTA Group, does a lot of our strategic planning. So I welcome them, thank them for their participation and their help, and look forward to the success of the webinar series as we go forward. So due to COVID-19 restrictions, obviously, it's had a great effect on our portfolio and how we connect with people, and so we have transitioned to this virtual format, much like a lot of folks have. We've been forced to do this, and we look forward to getting back in person as soon as possible. So this, to me, is a bridge. We do find value in the virtual pieces, which are part of the sweet spot of what NTSA does in terms of simulation and training. But we also appreciate the personal contact. So we're looking for the best blend, and we appreciate any comments or suggestions you may have related to that as we go forward. I was just at quarantine with 18 kids, and we experienced the virtual education piece of this from kids learning online, and it was a mixed bag of results. So there's goods and others, and I think we'll see how it goes moving forward. The COVID situation is actually highlighting some of our sweet spots in terms of the value proposition for distance learning and for virtual world work. So I think, again, that, I predicted in November that my 100-year prediction plan, where we would do a lot of virtual work. Little did I know that 4 months later, we'd have executed the 100-year plan. So here we are working that. We look forward to conditions, though, that allow us to get back together and feel strongly that, even though things are kind of crazy and wild, that the mission of supporting the warfighter is number one. And, we can't let this sort of, this other business get in the way. So as warriors, we're ready to move on that. So again, we've set up a series of webinars. They're going to be about every month, and we look forward to your inputs on topics as we move forward. Today's inaugural webinar is entitled M&S Professionals Leading Through Crisis, and obviously we're heavily focused on some of that in regard to the training and simulation community. as well as modeling simulation. So we're really pleased to have an all-star panel who's come together to support our program. Administratively, we'll have opening remarks by the panelists as individually, and then at the end we'll go into a transition period for questions, and use your question feature on your app there, and put forth your best question. Please have it be succinct, clear, and not political. And I'm going to look at them anyway. So we're looking for good quality questions, and I know that you all are up to that task. Because we're dealing with senior people, I've guaranteed them that we will close out at the 1 hour point. So anything that's left over in terms of question-wise, I'll try to sort through and provide them. If they're pointed to a particular panelist, or try to provide that to them. But we'll try to make sure that all the questions get some sort of some kind of work. Today's panel was really terrific, and I appreciate their time. Our key leaders from the training and simulation community, and all of these are from the Orlando area, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come out and help us. We've got from the Naval Warfare Center Training Systems Division, Captain Tim Hill, who's the commander of that organization from the Navy side, from PM Traces, who's the Marine Corps Training Systems Program Management. We got Colonel Lara. From AFAMS, the Air Force Modeling Simulation Group, we've got Colonel Robert Epstein. And the Deputy PEO for PEO STRI, who does all the Army training systems work, Mr. Tim Bishop is with us. So we'll go through that. I'll just go through a couple of highlights of who they are and what they do. And Captain Hill's obviously captain of the Navy, is an S3 pilot, transitioned to F-18s and became the commanding officer. And that's quite an astounding accomplishment from, as a fighter world guy. I think then he accumulated over 3,200 hours and 32 different aircraft models. So he's an accomplished pilot. It's been at NAWCTSD for a couple of years, and it's an absolute star in terms of doing work with regard to all the new transitional things, really transformational things that are going on with Sailor 2025. So from PM Traces, we've got Colonel Lara here. He is he's a program manager for training systems. He's located in Orlando. They're dedicated to improving the warfighter effectiveness of Marine Corps air ground task forces and globally deployed maritime expeditionary forces. And he's a rare individual. He started out as F-18 plane captain, and now he's up here in the upper stratosphere running the training systems command for the Marine Corps. So I congratulate you, Lou, on that. I appreciate you being here. From the Agency for Modeling and Simulation, AFAMS, we've got Robert Epstein. He's the lead Air Force Field Operating Agency in charge of enabling enterprise solutions for readiness across all the warfighting domains for the Air Force. He drives a lot of the modeling simulation initiatives and is working on really innovative ways to get capabilities to the fleet in the least possible time. So we appreciate you being here as well. Last, we've got, but not least actually, we've got Mr. Tim Bishop. And Tim is the Deputy Program Manager for the PEO STRI, and he's a longtime veteran in the SES world and doing great work. He was selected in 2019 to take over this PEO job, and he manages a portfolio of fielded systems with a current inventory of over $2.65 billion, operating in 125 locations, working 335,000 training devices. So it's a huge job. He's on the road right now in Huntsville doing business. So again, thank you very much. We appreciate you participating. I know you're a very busy man. So thank you to the panel. After their opening remarks, we're going to have a polling question, another polling question, and then we'll go into the question and answer series. So I'd like to now introduce Captain Hill for his opening remarks.
Thanks for the intro, Admiral, and thanks to you and the NTSA team for hosting this opportunity to connect as a community. I know I'm finding these opportunities are even more valuable in this time that tends to push us more towards isolation. And I'll apologize to the crowd that as much as I'm about to brag about the Navy's tools in this time, they seem to have let me down today as it relates to my webcam. So we'll gut through and do it audio only this afternoon. So, good afternoon to all of our friends and partners who were able to attend. I see we've got a pretty good crowd online. I'll start by talking a little bit about our team's current posture and the transition that got us into this posture. I think you'll probably hear some common threads from my counterparts as the other services talk about this as well. We're currently executing a max telework posture that we call the distributed workforce. We're under a DoD-wide stop movement order that limits most of our out-of-area hiring and any travel that doesn't have direct impact on fleet readiness. We've never closed the base under my other job title, which is the base commander here in Orlando, and we haven't actively limited access, but at least on the Navy side, we've required employees to gain approval from their supervisor before they report to the physical workplace. We've had visitors from outside the local area being required to self-quarantine for 14 days before they come on board the base. And then everyone is being screened prior to entering the workplace every day. They do a questionnaire before they come into work. If they've been approved to do so, then they repeat that same questionnaire once they get here, and they also have their temperature taken so we can tell if someone's exhibiting a sign of sickness. Since entering that posture in mid-March, we kind of averaged somewhere between 50 and 200 personnel on base every day. About half of those are construction contractors, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But typical traffic on the base is closer to 2,000 to 2,500 people a day. So we're somewhere less than 10% of normal traffic coming on the base daily right now. In terms of how we've dealt with those restrictions, I'm going to start by bragging about our team and noting that the transition was pretty seamless. For us, we had about 70% or more of our workforce doing some amount of telework prior to COVID-19, and we've long used a number of flexible work schedules. So we were kind of used to working in that sort of environment, just not at that level. We also had some planned construction projects looming that meant that over the summer, about half of our workforce was not going to have a desk for the summertime. And so that also meant as we vacated the building for the most part in the middle of March, which was right at our spring break time here, about half the workforce had to clean out their desks before they transitioned to telework. So that was a bit of a barrier, as you might imagine. As many of your teams have also experienced, the teams dealt with balancing their attempt to keep their contracts and programs moving forward with life changes such as multiple people trying to work from home at the same time. Sometimes that's a bandwidth constraint, sometimes that's a physical space constraint, etc. But then they also had things like the need to proctor ad hoc homeschool lessons for their kids that were now at home from school as well. So those were the individual challenges. And beyond that, the Navy also had some big challenges as it related to network access and collaborative tools when we entered that posture. I'll try to do it from memory, but I think my memory serves me correctly that Navy-wide, we had about a third the number of connections to our VPN, our virtual private network out there, as we had laptop computers deployed around the workforce. And not even everybody in the workforce had a laptop, so some people were tied to a desktop machine to start with and such. Additionally, there was only a small percentage of the workforce that had secure mobile devices that could connect and offset that VPN connection out there. Most of our tools were hidden and protected behind that VPN. So you know, one of the only things we had, and one of the only things we had for collaborative tool was DCS. If you're familiar with that, the Defense Collaborative System, it's pretty terrible. However, the Navy moved more rapidly than I ever could believe was possible by making some of those tools accessible, giving us more network access, and accelerating some of the deployment of some other more modern tools. So now we have a tool called DISA's Government Video Services, also known as GVS, which is a cybersecure video link. We have a rapidly deployed version of Microsoft Teams, and then we have WebEx that are all available to do our work securely. We've also worked to accelerate the deployment of Office 365 to help integrate those tools more seamlessly. The teams adapted to those tools really quickly. In a lot of places, they've used those tools in out-of-box ways to look at ways to mitigate the restrictions and the potential program impacts. For example, they worked out a standard procedure for using that tool GVS that I just mentioned to conduct test events remotely so that we could continue to deliver critical fleet product. Similarly, you know, we've used some of those tools combined with our personnel that we have fielded out at our sites around the world to be able to do upgrades and cybersecurity tasks that normally would have been accomplished by training, or excuse me, by traveling. We also had some good luck. I mentioned we had a previously planned construction project to update the seating on the third floor here in our building over this summer. This meant we already planned a great deal of remote work for this summer. We just had to accelerate it and increase the magnitude of that plan. So not starting from scratch. We also had an ongoing project to expand our SIPRNet room, the classified network, and increase the number of terminals that we had several times over. That project completed, and we actually installed the machines a couple of weeks ago, so about a month in to the COVID operations. And even after we implemented social distancing in that space, we have more than twice the amount of classified processing capability that we had prior to going in to COVID-19 operations. So again, we got lucky on that one. There's other stories like that, but basically through a combination of planning, innovation, and focus, we've had extremely good results in continuing to deliver capability to the fleet. Perhaps the easiest example to wrap your head around on that is that as of a couple of weeks ago, we had surpassed the $1 billion mark in fiscal year obligations, and that was a date earlier than any year in recent history that we've passed that mark. And it put us about $375 million ahead and counting of our annual plan for obligations. So I think you'll hear some from my counterparts that the contract machine is continuing to churn out as we need to there. In terms of lessons learned, I think there's a few we already know today and many more we're going to write in the months ahead. I think that first and foremost, the flexibility that we had already built in our workforce ahead of time, the telework and work schedules that I mentioned earlier, paid huge dividends in making the transition to a distributed workforce posture, make it go seamless and such. Most of our workforce had already worked out where and how they would work outside the office. They just had to now deal with those ad hoc homeschooling lessons on top of that. It also meant that we were also used to working a little bit asynchronously and scheduling our collaboration time, being thoughtful about it. The other lesson learned is that we have had to be even more diligent and thoughtful about preparing for meetings. You have to work out the logistics a little more closely ahead of time, file sharing instead of handing somebody a piece of paper, and managing the timing of the meeting. All the things that should have been occurring previously, but you're allowed to slip on a little bit when you're collaborating face to face. Finally, I think with much fewer people in the workplace, and the opportunity for drive-by conversations to be a little lower, again, you have to be very intentional about reaching out for your collaborative time. From a leadership perspective, we found we don't necessarily get the usual feedback on our communications, so we've had to reach out and actively solicit that feedback at all different levels, to include across my service counterparts across Team Orlando and such, and really work on instilling the balance as it relates, you know, when you start thinking about moving forward and increasing the amount of telework and maybe making what we're in a lot closer to the new normal, we know we're going to have to work through a balance between that and bringing people into the physical workspace to enculturate them in our workforce and our values out there. I'm going to wrap up with a little bit on our way ahead toward the new normal. So last week we received guidance from the Secretary of Defense and the Chief of Naval Operations Staff regarding how DoD is going to move forward. SecDef laid out broad guidance for resetting the DoD via a common framework that's managed locally by installation commanders. I'll do that under that hat here. There's data-driven criteria that begin relaxing some of the mitigation measures that we put in place through what we call our health protection condition. Those criteria look very hard at local conditions to determine what protection measures remain appropriate and allow us to continuously reevaluate for signs of a reflash. Similarly, all the installations around the country are resetting via a 5-stage plan that aligns to the President's Opening Up America plan. Each stage basically aims to accomplish a measure of restoring services that have been secured throughout the COVID-19 mitigations. The framework also begins to set a stage for accomplishing a slightly broader range of travel. We just got some guidance from SecDef on that earlier this week as well. We've released training, standard operating procedures, and an initial version of a reset plan to our local workforce. And that captures stuff that I'll do under my installation commander role, one that I usually don't talk about in this forum very often because it's not all that much of interest. It obviously is in the COVID era. It's about resetting the environment to allow our tenants to include my other command, NAWCTSD, to more readily accomplish their mission and give them the ability to do what they need and want to do under that. And we're truly looking forward there to working towards the new normal. I'll close out with a sincere thanks to all of you for your patience and partnership in navigating these uncharted waters. They truly are uncharted, particularly for any of us that are alive today. We're in it together to ensure that our fleet remains ready to fight tonight and to prevail against tomorrow's threat. I look forward to seeing everybody again in a few weeks at TSYS, the Training Systems Industry Symposium. That'll also be a virtual event hosted by NTSA, and I look forward to discussion and questions later on in the program today. Back to you, Admiral.
Okay, I believe we're going to go to Colonel Lara now. Admiral Robb has had a power outage at his house in Florida, the tribulations of going virtual. Colonel Lara, you are next up.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank Admiral Robb and the rest of the NTSA staff for allowing me the opportunity to participate in today's event. I would like to start off with thanking all of our industry partners for all their hard work and flexibility during this period. Their perseverance, their flexibility has enabled us to continue to be successful in our mission. There's currently no playbook for what our country is going through right now. Like any other contingency environment, we have been pressurized to build one as we progress through this. I would specifically like to thank my fellow Team Orlando partners for constant communication, the collaboration, and the persistent support. Back in early March, as we began to experience the current environment we're in, it was crucial for us to maintain positive communication with all our stakeholders. As America's 911 force in readiness, training availability is hugely important. We had to balance the mission while ensuring our Marines and sailors were able to continue to train in a safe manner, not placed in harm's way. We worked with our industry partners to ensure they had unimpeded access to bases training areas. Our contracts team worked diligently to issue over 20 mission essential letters to our contractors and conducted contract modifications to include the appropriate mission essential DFARS clauses to be able to work in this type of an environment. We held one-on-one sessions with all our contractors performing services or supplies for PM Traces to discuss issues, gather industry concerns, and establish an open line of communication regarding future issues. Simultaneously, our program teams were working with our requirement sponsor and customer training and education command and coordinated discussions with BUMED and CDC and our fleet units to develop deep cleaning instructions for all our training systems across the fleet. In turn, we requested an operational training process across the entire Marine Corps in order to allow our industry partners the time to resource the right PPE, the cleaning supplies, and conduct deep cleaning procedures for all our training systems. Over a 2-week period, all of our training systems were back and fully functional and operational, and I attribute the huge success to that responsiveness to our industry partners. As of March 18th, PM Traces went into max telework. We're currently at 97% folks who are fully on telework. That is totally a different environment that what Captain Hill described for his workforce. We predominantly had everybody here with very limited folks being in a telework environment. To wrap it up, we experienced a lot of the similar issues that Captain Hill described, to include IT shutting down, VPN access. Luckily, the Marine Corps went ahead and bought increased level of services for VPNs. Some of the difficulties we experienced are simple things like doing dermal appointments at each of our base posts and stations. We're not able to conduct the day-to-day operations that we normally do. On the HR side of the house, hiring, interviews, doing face-to-face or mask-to-mask interviews have been challenging with the current CDC guidance. Trying to do telephone interviews have always been less than desirable, still remaining productive and not delaying due to COVID-19. Obviously, personnel resources make a huge impact in a small organization such as PM Traces. Additionally, just having that direct supervisor-employee discussion, that the closed door type, things like that have been difficult. They're less effective over the phone. Some of the challenge that we have experienced here at Traces. Some of the successes that I have to say is we have experienced a better work-life balance. A lot of our employees have communicated to me that they have been able to reinvest their commuting time into more productive manners and being able to get productivity up and focus on the warfighter, our Marines out there. Lastly, I welcome being here on the panel, and I look forward to your questions as we progress. I'll be turning it over back to Colonel Epstein. I believe he's next. Over.
Colonel Epstein, you're up.
Welcome back, and thank you, sir, for hosting this and giving us the opportunity. To all the people out here who decide to sign up today, I think this is the new norm on the way we're going to function. So I appreciate you guys tuning in, and to NTSA for always putting on a professional event. Let me start off with AFAMS did a good job of, when this initially kicked off, sort of adapting to this new norm. We adapted fairly quickly. We moved into a max telework posture almost immediately from the kickoff. So we followed suit with all the other DoD organizations here in Orlando. And we proceeded to start creating an opportunity where we could collaborate but not need to actually be in the same building. So we went to physical distancing very quickly. Local procedures, we followed the local procedures of NSA Orlando, as well as that of the guidance we're getting through the Pentagon. We are under a stop movement also, so we don't have any new personnel coming in right now, at least till the end of the summer. So minimal impact to the workforce here. We are still able to hire, so that is one of the things that has not stopped or has not changed. As an assessment of our organization, the ability to survive and operate the contingency operations and the continuity of operations and the way we deal with hurricanes or the way we deal with a chemical attack really adapted well to the way we would need to do business here locally under a pandemic. And so we found that we have not actually lost any productivity. Matter of fact, the new collaborative tools has actually allowed us to continue doing business in a fairly consistent way. With that being said, we are still open for business. So one of the things I really wanted to talk about was some of the acquisition programs or some of the things that are going on and some of the changes the Air Force is making that may be of interest to the group here. So I know one of the big things people had questions about was, is this going to affect SCARS? And everything we can say right now is that SCARS is still on track as we move forward. This award is still supposed to happen this summer. And from everything that Colonel Currian and team have told me is this is really not going to be a major impact to the way that contract gets awarded. The Air Force Modeling and Simulation Support Contract, again, that's one of those where we still see that awarding this month. and we don't see that actually being a problem. Other things, the Air Force modeling simulation is not. The C2 set, the command and control for the synthetic environment for training. There's an RFI on the street right now. So that RFI is on the street, and it's supposed to award, or at least they're expecting that to close out as of 1 June. That's coming out of Det 12, Colonel Wichkowski's group at Hanscom. And then that's actually the suite of models that is going to allow us to create the constructive environment for AOC training and to support our joint exercises. Other things that are going on, SBIR efforts. We did pull ourselves out of SBIR 20.2, but the Air Force actually just had their pitch bowl where they were able to award $625 million to small businesses. So those things are still continuing to go. Dr. Will Roper, SAP AQ, our Chief Acquisition Technology and Logistics Officer, realizes that under physical distancing, virtual meetings and dealing with industry in a virtual way is probably our new norm. And actually, it's the preferred way of doing business. So he's not in any rush to move back to physical gatherings. Now, that being said, he did say that after the pandemic or when things are reopening, that we will still do large conferences, but actually our ability to interact with industry right now is probably better suited to these virtual engagements, and we're going to see that continue. So that's a great opportunity, or for those of you listening, a great way that you should be looking to contact us or contact the acquisition agencies on how you're going to do business in the future. With that, as the Air Force has actually recently, 11 May, created the Chief Modeling and Simulation Office for the Air Force under acquisition. So this is a direct report under Dr. Roper. Mr. Richard Templowski was hired as the new CMSA, the Chief Modeling and Simulation Officer, and he's going to be responsible for the enterprise view of sort of synchronizing all the different acquisition efforts for modeling and simulation under the Air Force. So that'll be training, that'll be test, that'll be analytics, and sort of making sure that we have more reusability or more interoperability. I look forward to introducing him either at TSA specifically or in the future upcoming, we'll do a press release to give more information on him. That office is standing up. They're going to be located in DC out of Ballston and actually supporting across the entire enterprise. And that being said, we'll be at TSIS this year, everything virtual. Looking forward to the opportunities to see everybody again at ITSIC at the end of the year. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Admiral Robb.
Okay, hey, thanks, Bob. I appreciate it. You guys are great. And I'll turn it over now to Mr. Tim Bishop.
Thank you, sir. I want to say again, just as my counterparts here did, sir, I want to thank you very much and the NTSA staff for putting this webinar on and having me participate here. You know, it's great that I get to go last year because I think Bob, Tim, and Lou have pretty much covered all of the basics. And so what I'll try to do in the interest of time is just kind of skip over the mountaintops and just hit a couple of high points, and then we can get to the question and answer pieces of this. Just a couple of things I'd like to say. I think Tim mentioned earlier that they felt like they were a little lucky. I think we at PEO STRI were a little lucky as well. The 2 week we'd been doing a pilot program into telework for the past about 4 months at PEO STRI, and then we had the week before just gone into full implementation of telework with regard to PEO STRI the week before the COVID crisis really took hold. And then we went from, you know, basically a one-day telework process over to 100% of our workforce is in telework. We have a plan that has been put in place that we're working to try and bring folks back into the work environment. You know, Captain Hill really addressed most of the things associated with how we do business on a day-to-day. We are on the same facilities and compound with Tim, and I want to really take an opportunity here to thank Captain Hill and his team with regard to the communication that we've had across the board to ensure that we're synchronized with that. We've had IPTs going on, and I think everyone has been involved to make sure that we're consistent across the board with regard to the workforce and how we bring folks back. Right now, we just moved into, or we are in what we call a phase 1B. There's a chart that's going to be provided for folks to take a look at, which means we're roughly at the 25% mark as far as the workforce. We have somewhere between 100 or 80 and 100 folks that are in the partnership facilities and the NAWCTSD base facility areas as we speak, and we are ramping up to move into phase 2. The IPT is meeting on that now. There are certain conditions that have to be met, and if you take a look at that chart, you'll see that. I think overall, the largest difference that I can bring to bear from discussion is we do provide training capability to the warfighter all over the world. And so our challenge is managing COVID restrictions for every state, every country, every region that we provide training capability in. That's probably been one of our biggest challenges, to make sure we understand quarantine requirements, we understand the testing requirements for moving into facilities from California to Michigan to the state of Florida. So it's made it a little bit more challenging because we are so widely dispersed, but I will say our industry partners who provide that training capability across the board have been outstanding. They're who we've leveraged to ensure we know what needs to be done. And we are in compliance with all the regulations from the executive office all the way down to the local and state government agencies. I will say probably one thing that, and I know there was a few discussions here, the new way of doing business through, the different virtual capabilities that are out there. One thing I would just like to highlight here, we are blessed here with PEO STRI to have our own red team, and I know many of you out there know that we have that. And one thing I would like to make sure that everybody does keep in mind is with new applications and new capability, is new surface areas for our adversaries to take advantage of. And we've had our red team that has been doing open looks to ensure, as we move into these various products that have already been discussed, are doing so in a secure manner. How these systems are set up and how they're configured are key to the success and to ensure our OPSEC as we continue to work in this telework environment, because I think you will see a greater telework environment from this point forward. We have seen how this can help us from the perspective of the amount of money we pay for floor space, as an example. We have a great opportunity in collaboration with UCF in the partnership facilities, but there are some buildings that are not part of that partnership program that we can look to help minimize some of those costs from a facilities perspective, but also get the workforce the tools that they need to get the job done. And with regard to the job, we really have not seen the first couple of weeks was just trying to get our head around some of the challenges that we had. In the first week, we created a dashboard, and we were meeting literally 3 o'clock every afternoon to make sure everybody had the information. Those have gone all the way down to a couple of times a week. We're in a battle rhythm now to work in this environment, and I think as my other Team Orlando partners have already said, contracts are in place, hiring still continues, and for us, testing and training is still going on. Just to speak briefly about the test range or the training ranges, the NTC, JRTC, JMRC, most of those have been the training rotations. All of those training rotations have been held until toward the end of June. The expectations will move back, but that hasn't stopped the work. We have taken advantage of that white space to do upgrades from a cybersecurity perspective, to do upgrades to facilities and capabilities. We're always searching for white space. This created white space that will allow us to get after some of the things that have been stacked up in the queue. So work continues, again, with and in compliance with the COVID-19 restrictions. Probably our biggest challenge has been the 2 weeks of self-quarantine in both directions. I spoke briefly with Admiral Robb before the thing kicked off. I think that's been one of the biggest challenges challenges that we have is we're 14 days quarantine going into a location, and we're 14 days quarantine coming out of a location because of the radius of that separation. But we have also worked ways within the base structure and with the Army to try to get after some of those challenges in a safe and effective manner that's allowed us to get the job done. Let's see, I think overall, most of I'll speak just briefly on the contract actions. I'll have to second what my counterparts have already reiterated, or has already iterated to the group here, is contracting. We do spend plan reviews every single month with every single PM. I mean, we are way ahead of our expectations with regards to money and contract awards. Our goal has been to try to pull everything back where we have very little in the fourth quarter. And in most instances, we are tracking to that. We still have some fourth quarter awards that are hanging out there, but for the most part, the contracting and the support from our ACC Orlando partners has been exceptional. We're in a different world. We're in a different environment than we were, only 2 months ago. But the resiliency and the persistence that the workforce shows continues to impress me. And that also goes from our industry partners in the unique ways that we have found to overcome the challenges that we have. I mean, who would have thought we could figure out how to do an RMF, evaluation and get that documentation and stuff processed in a COVID environment? But one of the things that ASALT has emphasized, and the acquisition community on the Army side has emphasized, is that it's not COVID is not the reason why we can't do something. How we ask our teams to present right up front is how they're mitigating it, right? Mitigation to get after success and to get after execution, and that has served us well because we continue to do great things for the soldier. So Admiral Robb, I'll turn it over to you and we'll get to some questions here.
Okay, hey, thanks, Tim. Hey, do you have any intel on leadership changes at PO STRI or anything going on there in terms of people moving around?
Yeah, I can briefly just cover that. We're in the process of saying our farewell to Brigadier General Sloan. As many of you know, his last day in the office will be, I believe, 8 June. He's in the out processing mode. I will take over, I think, on the 5th of June as the acting PEO for STRI until the new PEO has been or transitions in. Many of you may or may not heard of who that potentially could be. Unfortunately, I'm still bound by certain releases of information. So all I can say is this point in time is that we are expecting the new PEO to rise sometime in the late July timeframe, which will be, I think, around 23 July, depending upon leave. We do expect the individual to be in full swing as the PEO in the mid-August timeframe. We are going to have developmental assignments for the Deputy Program Executive Office position. As I move up into acting, we'll do 2 rotations with acting DPEOs from a developmental perspective, and I am in the process of reviewing those candidates as we speak, and would expect that the announcement of that would be by the end of this week or Monday at the latest. Over.
Okay, thanks. I know that some of that's somewhat sensitive, and so we look forward to that. So appreciate the panelists' insights. Has some great stuff. Juliana, can you put up the second or the first polling question? And for the attendees, if you would look at this, and we'll see if you're asleep or awake, and try to react to this within the next 10 or 15 seconds, and then we'll move on to the question section. As we're doing that, I'll actually move into the first section of questions. One of the things that we at NTSA have seen, well, it's 2 things significant that are part of the environment. One is the IT challenges. So as we've had today, some how do you connect with government and industry? What is, Zoom is out, something else, it's hard to find that common environment where we can actually do networking and communications seamlessly. Have you all found any good, I heard Teams, WebEx, GBS, what can we do as NTSA to get to where we can get a common framework where we can go forward with this next generation vision for how we communicate? Anybody got a comment on that?
I'll jump in on that, sir. It's Octa. From at least from our experience so far, we've played around with pretty much every one of those things, as I suspect my counterparts have too. It's a matter of what the content that we're going to be discussing and going forward is going to be like. As a for instance, when we looked at the remote witnessing of test events and acceptance events, the volume of critical unclassified information that was required there put us in a place where we weren't allowed to use at least our temporary version of Teams, and certainly not Zoom or WebEx that have different restrictions on them. So we chose to go down the path of GVS, as I mentioned before, which is unique to the government. On the other hand, though, we've had plenty of things, like I've done several industry 1v1s or multicast kinds of things that we've done on Zoom, and largely just kind of using the rules that have been set up where we can't initiate the Zoom, but we certainly can be part of it as long as we're not discussing FOUO information. So I think there's a lot of ways to be flexible and make it work. Over.
Yeah, I think this is almost like a blended warrior problem, where we're trying to figure out how to integrate IT networking for industry, and academia. And so personally, and I think for the NTSA team, we've had a moving target here in terms of getting everybody together. So that would be something I think over time we need to try to take on. A question, this is sort of at the strategic level, but one of the problems we're having is we see the international folks are really tied up. They can't travel. They're having a hard time, individually, Europe, Pacific Rim, doing their own quarantine kind of problems, and they can't get on the airplane. So what are you all doing with regard to your international programs? Do you see any effects on this? How are you accommodating that?
Yeah, this is Tim. I'll address that briefly. I mean, we do quite a lot of FMS work, as you know. Dale Whitaker and the IPO team there. We've had some impacts with regard to that, especially in countries where only mission critical personnel are allowed to stay. So we've actually had to transition some of our folks out of those areas. However, again, the ability to connect through various means, it has still been available to us. Most of the impact that we've seen is not really our ability to communicate with them, given the distances we've already had to work, everything from VTC to SVTC to meeting times and schedules. Very rarely, those were the ones we really tried to focus to try to reserve resources with regard to travel. So that kind of communication has really on our side not been impacted. The most impact that we've seen with regard to our international partners has been the restrictions at the country level that have required us to pull some of our people out, which has put some of our training programs from an FMS perspective kind of in a holding pattern until those doors and opportunities are opened back up for our folks to move in. Over.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that. I think this is again sort of a backbone question. It's something that I personally have been working for 9 years and trying to getting everybody on the same page. So it's hard. So let me ask a question about the virtual world. Have any of the services been working to actually move some of the training into the home? If the soldier, sailor, Marine can't leave their house, has it been pushed forward, or are we just holding fire?
Sir, it's I'll jump on that grenade first and just say I think my sense of things for us is that that's a thing we were already pursuing, mainly as part of the Ready Relevant Learning Initiative and some of the kind of parallel initiatives there. things like our e-helm program, where we were pushing that out to our delayed entry recruits and such. And so I don't know that I'd say I've seen us push more of that than we were prior to COVID. I think it's kind of accentuated the need for it. And then the other thing that I would say that I've noticed as a feature, at least across our portfolio, I'm kind of interested to hear what my counterparts have to say on it, is that we're actually seeing a higher demand on our simulator time. And we set in April, actually set a record for utilization rate on simulators out on the West Coast. And some of that is a matter of timing, as you know, with the way the cyclical nature of Navy deployments are. But some of that, I think, has every bit to owe to the fact that there's a lot fewer moving parts to going and flying a sortie in the simulator than there is to going and flying a sortie in the airplane as it relates to mitigation measures. And so I think we've seen another, kind of argument for that, if you will.
Hey, I'm going to go ahead and
Thanks,
piggyback on what Captain Hill was saying. So the Air Force has definitely seen a bump in requirement to actually do distributed training. So the COVID-19 has highlighted that as another opportunity, especially to do training at home station without having to send people to centralized locations. And then that plays into distributed ops and mission rehearsals. So the demand signal has actually gone up. And this has actually acts as a catalyst, I think, to highlight that to senior leadership.
Okay, any other comments? So I've got a question for Tim Bishop specifically, but not necessarily, could be anyone, but I'm looking for your thoughts about the impact of all this on the OTA process. The OTA process, has these consortiums that are sort of surrounding small business opportunities, and so a lot of them are non-traditional, a little bit out there, and so how are we managing? Have you seen any changes in the OTA process due to the COVID problem?
No, sir. I mean, we really haven't seen a change, to the process with regards to our contract activities on the OTA side. In fact, there's been more of an emphasis on some of the activities and programs that we're supporting to get out to the OTA. We just held our third in a series of engagements with industry on our T-REX contract. We did that last week so that we can get feedback from the small business and industry partners, especially the non-traditionals. We typically in those series have, cut across from non-traditional to, the traditional business space and small and large. And we had a full complement of, I think, 14 or so of our industry partners that participated. And that's kind of a reverse PALT session where we are being asked questions by the industry partners on and getting feedback on how things are going. And I think the feedback is in general positive. It's been greatly positive, actually. I mean, there are still some things we need to work out. Information flow is important, and the COVID-19 really has just made us put more emphasis to ensure websites are up to date. The information that you need is available at your fingertip, one touch away. I think if it's impacted us any at all, it has been that emphasis. I think we rely heavily on PALT to do a lot of things for us, rely a lot on a lot of face-to-face activities. It has just changed our emphasis to where that information is located so the industry has it. Over.
Okay, I appreciate that. Tim or anybody else got a comment on I'm worried about the small businesses and the guys who are out, the unusual suspects that we were pursuing for quite a while, in a big way, the non-traditionals. And between that and CMMC, I'm trying to figure out what the next barrier to entry is, and this could be good or bad, depending on whether or not they can get in. Any comments on that?
Hey, Tim, I hate to barge in on you here, but let me say one thing, sir. You mentioned CMMC, right? And so one of the things that PEO STRI is supporting currently through a congressional program is what we call our National National Cybersecurity Operations Center, the NCSOC, that's getting after helping the defense industrial base across small business and large business from helping them meet and understand what those requirements are. That facility opened its doors just before COVID. In fact, the open door or the open house we were going to have on that was postponed as a result of that. But there are resources where the small businesses can go out now that is in a pilot program over the next 3 years that would allow these small businesses to come in, and it's a service that's paid for under a congressionally funded program to help them understand where their cybersecurity challenges are and to help them get through those processes. And I think it's just very important for us to get that information out. I didn't mean to step on you there, Octa, but that facility's open, and if there's any way, please don't hesitate to reach out to us here at PEO STRI if there's any way we can give you any help or support on how to get that. That's run out of our Huntsville offices at the Threat Systems Management Office. Over.
Yeah, and jumping in to tag on with that, so absolutely no worries about stepping there because we're absolutely aligned in all that. I know that talking with our small business advocate, Leslie Faircloth here, you know, she's busier than she ever has been in terms of trying to reach out and help nurture our small business community through this. I know that from my workings with the Orlando Economic Partnership, that's a big concern here locally in general, not just for the MS&T community, but writ large, just because the financials of a small business are very different and you know, they're maybe a little more susceptible to some of these interruptions and such. And so we're really working hard to try to connect, you know, the government resources that have been made available for small businesses with those small businesses to help them weather the storm, because we know, you know, our historic award levels to small businesses are not insignificant in our portfolio, and it's frankly why the voice track I used with our team very early on in this, and the message we were trying to get out to all of our partners is that the number one thing that our command could do in this to contribute to, you know, the mitigation of the COVID effects, if you will, was to stay open and stay on target and get ahead of target in terms of trying to get, you know, contracts released and product out to the fleet, because we knew that keeping the economic engine going, that is frankly our biggest factor in being able to deliver capability to the fleet, was our number one mission there. There was a lot of pull as a laboratory to potentially do some other things that were more directly related to, you know, ventilator shortages or mask shortages or stuff like that. We had very little capacity for that kind of stuff to start with, and frankly said, hey, there's other people that are much more qualified to do that. Let's go do what we're qualified to do. And so that has been a huge concentration for us, and it remains a huge concentration for us. Over.
Okay, thanks, Octa. So we're wrapping up some. You know, I'll give you a last question for the panel. What parts of this virtual thing do you think will remain after the new, you know, into the new normal? Because you know, that's interesting. You talk about pulse, you talk about different interactions. I think some of the brainstorming sessions, some of the activities, how you engage industry. You know, just let me know what you think. You know, one or two things that you might see remaining out of this virtual world.
Well, just so somebody jumps on it, I'll start from the Navy perspective, and in particular from NAWCTSD's perspective. I think we're going to continue to use and lean forward further, as Tim was mentioning earlier, with respect to the virtual workforce posture. We're probably never going to look the same as we did after this in terms of how much telework we do and that sort of thing. I think as it relates to our industry partners and how we're going to do programs and that sort of thing, I think we're going to take a hard look before we do a physical traveling event anywhere and see and really ask a hard question about whether we can do that virtually. And by that, I mean, like, take a test event you know, if we've got a company out there that we have a long-standing relationship with, and we've done a lot of work, and now we're on the third or fourth iteration of upgrades, maybe that doesn't need to be an on-site test witness or an on-site physical audit of the physical configuration audit of the delivery. Maybe that can be done virtually, but at you know, at very low risk out there, and we can save time and money by doing it that way. Those are the kinds of things I think are going to stick. I think that we very clearly recognize that things like PALT and some of the other like, you know, TSIS and ITSIC are things that probably can and should be done physically once we're able to do that again, because the value of the conversations, especially those 1v1 conversations that are kind of what we like to call accidental collisions, at times are understated, to say the least. You just can't duplicate that.
Anybody else have a thought?
Admiral Bob, I'll go ahead and
Yeah.
chime in. Colonel Lara here real quick. I think from my perspective, at least from our organization and also from our higher headquarters, Marine Corps Systems Command, I think we're going to be relooking at our archaic time management handbook that we've been utilizing. We're used to the old industrial age model of butts and seats equals performance, where I think we could make a lot more benefit of having, we've seen it over this last 3 months, where telework has been significant. There's been a lot better performance across the board. We're ahead of schedule in a lot of the things we do. So one of the things our commanding general is looking at is revamping our telework policy to enable us to be more like our industry partners. So that's something that I think will remain in place, at least from my organization. Over.
Thanks. Any other last comment? I heard one other. Were you looking to chime in?
Yes, sir. So I agree 100% with what Colonel Lara just said. We're going to see the use of the Microsoft Teams or programs like that for collaborative nature. And I think that's going to continue even inside the workplace or teleworking situations. It's a different way of doing business, and it's sort of COVID-19 has proven that that can not only be effective, but efficient. So I think you're going to see significant changes in the way technology is used and the way time management is done as we move forward.
Okay, thanks. So I think it is a great experiment in terms of what can you do remotely. And a lot of our folks in industry don't have a desk. You know, they're completely remote, and you know, I am remote at this point. So I have a question. The last question, which I will answer myself, is what do we expect the impact of COVID-19 to be on ITSIC? And I just want to make sure everybody understands that we're fully headed for physical contact, full Monty ITSIC at this point. And you know, who knows? 6 months is a long time. And we are doing contingency planning for all hybrid, other, you know, potential ways to do it. But the best thing we can do is get together and work together and apply a lot of the virtual capabilities that we see, you know, to actually increase the impact and the influence and the effect of ITSIC on maybe a wider audience. So Debbie and I are looking at a whole lot of different venues and ways to virtualize the content of ITSIC, and I think it's nothing but good, and we look forward to that. So in wrapping up, I just want to thank you guys for your time, and this has not been trivial. It's been a pleasure reconnecting with you in many cases. We appreciate your passion for the mission, and you know, this is what we're all about. So thank you very much for being here. If we had a big round of applause from the virtual group, we'll have to generate one of those next time. Our next webinar is going to be in about a month, and we're open to topics. We have CMMC as a big deal in the NDIA world, so we're interested in how that's affecting. We also have ADL, the Advanced Distributed Learning folks interested, and we're all also interested in a future webinar with this group, or something like it, talking about the real effect of training you know, what's actually happening out in the field. So there's some of that was mentioned today, but I really appreciate that. So with that, I'm going to go to the last polling question. Juliana, you have that? So here, take 10 seconds. What kind of innovation in your programs or work activity have you experienced? I think probably none is probably not an answer here. You all will also see a post-webinar survey. We appreciate, you know, brutal, whatever, you know, give us good, bad, ugly, and give us some good ideas. Our webinar task force will be going out soliciting topics. When we find topics, you know, find good topics, we're going to look for ways that you can propose topics, host topics, and bring your own agenda to this webinar series. So we really appreciate that. We think that this is important. It's a little bit of a new way for NTSA to get out, you know, other than the 9 events we do, and we appreciate that. So with that, Renee, let's go ahead and call it a day.